You should be grateful for what you have, Ariel. Fair is fair. Those words hit me like a physical blow as I stood in my mother's living room, clutching a cheap keychain shaped like a generic heart. The price tag was still attached to the thin metal ring, and I could see it clearly in the glow of the Christmas tree lights. $2.99. Meanwhile, my younger sister Vivian was outside in the driveway, squealing with delight as she ran her perfectly manicured fingers across the hood of a brand new Range Rover, complete with a massive silver bow that probably cost more than my pathetic gift. My name is Ariel, and I am 28 years old. I work as a senior accountant at a manufacturing firm in Denver, Colorado, where I have spent the last 6 years building my career from the ground up. I pay my own bills, own my own condo, and have never once asked my parents for a single dollar since I graduated from college. I thought that independence would eventually earn me respect in this family. I thought that proving myself would matter. I was devastatingly, painfully wrong. Christmas morning at my mother Patricia's house had always been a complicated affair, but this year felt different. There was a sharpness in the air that I could not quite explain, a tension that had been building since I walked through the front door the night before. My father Gregory sat in his leather recliner, nursing a glass of bourbon and avoiding eye contact with everyone in the room. My mother flitted around the living room like a nervous bird, arranging presents under the tree with an intensity that suggested she was hiding something big. Vivian arrived last as usual, making her grand entrance in designer clothes and freshly highlighted hair. At 25 years old, she had never held a job for more than 3 months, never paid rent, and never once worried about where her next meal would come from. Our parents covered everything for her, from her apartment in the trendy part of town to her monthly shopping sprees and expensive spa treatments. The justification was always the same tired excuse. Vivian was finding herself. Vivian was sensitive. Vivian needed more support than other people. I watched as the presents were distributed that morning, my stomach tightening with each passing minute. Vivian's pile grew mountainous while mine remained pathetically small. Designer handbags, expensive jewelry, the latest electronics, gift cards worth hundreds of dollars each. And then came the moment that would change everything about how I saw my place in this family. My mother stood up with a dramatic flourish, her eyes bright with barely contained excitement. Vivian, sweetie, there's one more present for you, but you'll have to come outside to see it. The entire family trooped out into the cold December air, and there it sat in the driveway like a monument to favoritism. A gleaming black Range Rover with all the luxury trimmings, the enormous silver bow catching the weak winter sunlight. Vivian screamed so loudly that the neighbors 3 houses down probably heard. She threw herself at our mother, sobbing with joy, while our father smiled benignly from the sidelines like this was perfectly normal. I stood frozen on the porch, the cheap keychain still clutched in my hand. The contrast was so absurd, so blatantly cruel, that I almost laughed out loud. Almost. Instead, I felt something inside me crack. A fissure that had been forming for years finally splitting wide open. When we returned inside, I tried desperately to compose myself. I told myself that material things did not matter, that I was above this pettiness, that my worth was not determined by what I received under a Christmas tree. But then my mother turned to me with that familiar patronizing smile, and the words that came out of her mouth shattered any remaining illusion I had about my place in this family. You should be grateful for what you have, Ariel. Fair is fair. Your sister has had a difficult year, and she deserves something special to lift her spirits. Fair is fair. The phrase bounced around my skull like a pinball machine gone haywire. How was any of this fair? Vivian's difficult year had consisted of breaking up with a boyfriend who refused to fund her lifestyle, and briefly considering getting a part-time job before deciding it was beneath her. My year had included a cancer scare that required 2 biopsies, a 70-hour work week during tax season, and the death of my beloved cat who had been my companion for 12 years. But none of that mattered in Patricia's carefully constructed world. In her reality, Vivian was the princess who deserved endless support, and I was the ungrateful daughter who should be thankful for whatever scraps fell from the table. I looked down at the keychain in my hand, that pathetic little heart that cost less than a cup of coffee. And in that moment, standing in my mother's living room, surrounded by the evidence of her favoritism, I made a decision that would change everything. I was done. I was done smiling through the humiliation. Done pretending that any of this was acceptable. Done being the daughter who kept coming back for more abuse disguised as family tradition. The familiar burn in my stomach solidified into something harder, something colder, something that felt remarkably like resolve. The thing about being the unfavored child is that you become an expert at cataloging injustices. Not because you want to be bitter or keep score, but because the pattern becomes so overwhelming that your brain starts keeping track automatically, building a case file of evidence that no one will ever ask to see. I remember Christmas when I was 12 years old. Vivian, who was only 9 at the time, received a brand new bicycle with streamers on the handlebars, roller skates, a television for her bedroom, and a complete wardrobe refresh with all the trendy clothes the other girls at school were wearing. I received a single book from the bargain bin at the local bookstore, its cover torn and spine already cracked from being handled by countless other customers. When I asked my mother why the gifts were so dramatically different, she told me that Vivian needed more encouragement because she struggled in school. Never mind that I was the one bringing home straight A's while Vivian barely scraped by with C's and D's. Then there was my 16th birthday, which fell on the same week as Vivian's dance recital. My parents decided that my birthday dinner could wait because Vivian needed their full attention and unwavering support. My birthday dinner never happened. Vivian got a party at an expensive restaurant after her recital, complete with balloons and a professionally decorated cake. I got a card with $20 in it, handed to me almost as an afterthought 3 weeks later, when my mother found it buried under some papers on the kitchen counter. College was another chapter in this endless saga of inequality. I worked 2 jobs to pay my tuition because my parents told me they simply could not afford to help with my education. Meanwhile, Vivian's entire 4-year degree was funded without question or complaint. When I graduated with honors and a job offer from a prestigious firm, my mother's response was a lukewarm congratulations, followed by a 20-minute monologue about how worried she was that Vivian would never find her path in life. The favoritism was not subtle. It was not something I had imagined or exaggerated in my mind during moments of self-pity. It was blatant, consistent, and utterly unapologetic. My mother had simply decided early on that Vivian was the child who mattered, and nothing I did would ever change that fundamental calculation. I thought about all of this as I sat in my mother's guest bedroom that Christmas night, the sounds of Vivian's continued celebration drifting up from downstairs. She was showing off her new car to our cousin Tyler, who had stopped by for dessert and stayed to admire the luxury vehicle. I could hear her high-pitched laughter, my mother's approving murmurs, the clink of champagne glasses raised in toast after toast to Vivian's good fortune. No one had come to check on me since I excused myself after dinner. No one had noticed that I barely touched my food, that my responses had grown monosyllabic, that I was quietly falling apart at the seams. In this family, I was invisible, unless I was needed to provide an audience for Vivian's latest triumph or a scapegoat for her latest failure. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos from the day, the ones my mother had already posted on social media with gushing captions about family and gratitude and counting her blessings. In every single picture, Vivian was front and center, beaming at the camera. I appeared in only one photograph, partially obscured by my father's shoulder, my expression carefully blank, because I had learned long ago not to let my true feelings show. The comments were already rolling in from friends and extended family members. Everyone was congratulating Vivian on her beautiful new car, telling my mother what a wonderful and generous gift, expressing envy and admiration for our seemingly perfect family. Not a single person asked what I had received. Not a single person wondered why the gifts were so dramatically different. The narrative had already been written and accepted. Vivian was the star of this family, and I was merely a supporting character in her story. I thought about the keychain sitting on the dresser across the room. I had not even bothered to remove it from its cheap plastic packaging. What was the point? It was not a gift given with love or thought or any consideration of who I was as a person. It was an obligation fulfilled, a box checked, a way for my mother to claim she had treated her children equally, while the evidence screamed otherwise to anyone paying attention. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Josephine. She knew about my family dynamics because she had witnessed enough holiday disasters over the years to understand exactly what I was going through every time I went home. "How bad is it this year?" she asked. I typed back a brief summary of the day's events, and her response was immediate and fierce. "Get out of there. Tonight if you can. You don't owe them your presence or your suffering." She was right. I knew she was absolutely right. But leaving meant admitting defeat, accepting that this family would never see me as anything more than an afterthought. And some small, stubborn part of me still wanted to believe that things could change, that someday my mother would wake up and realize how much damage she had done. That stubborn hope had kept me coming back year after year, subjecting myself to humiliation after humiliation in the desperate belief that love could be earned if I just tried hard enough, smiled wide enough, asked for little enough. The house grew quiet around midnight. Vivian had finally stopped gushing about her Range Rover and retreated to her old bedroom, which my mother had preserved like a shrine, complete with childhood trophies and photographs, and the same pink bedspread she had picked out when she was 13. My parents shuffled off to bed shortly after, my mother calling up a half-hearted goodnight that I did not bother to acknowledge. I lay in the darkness of the guest room, staring at the ceiling, running through my options with the analytical mind that had served me so well in my career, but had failed me completely when it came to my family. Part of me wanted to confront my mother directly, to lay out every instance of favoritism in excruciating detail and demand an explanation that made sense. But I had tried that approach before, years ago, and the result had been a masterclass in deflection and manipulation. She had cried, accused me of being jealous, twisted every piece of evidence until somehow I became the villain for noticing the obvious. No, direct confrontation would not work with Patricia. My mother was too skilled at manipulation, too practiced at making herself the victim in any conflict. If I wanted to make a point that would actually land, I would have to do it differently. I would have to speak a language she could not twist or reinterpret. The idea came to me slowly, forming in the quiet hours between midnight and dawn. It was petty, perhaps. Some might even call it childish or passive-aggressive. But after 28 years of swallowing my pride and pretending everything was fine, I had earned the right to a little pettiness. I had earned the right to make a statement without having to justify it in a conversation that would inevitably be turned against me. At exactly 3 o'clock in the morning, I crept downstairs with my packed bag over my shoulder. The Christmas tree still glowed in the corner of the living room, its lights casting soft shadows across the remaining wrapping paper and empty gift boxes. Vivian's pile of presents had been neatly stacked near the fireplace, a monument to maternal devotion that would probably be photographed and posted on social media tomorrow. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the keychain, that cheap little heart with its price tag still attached. Walking slowly and deliberately to the center of the room, I placed it carefully on the floor directly beneath the Christmas tree, positioning it so it would be the first thing anyone saw when they came downstairs in the morning. A $2.99 memorial to everything this family had shown me about my worth. Then, I walked out the front door without looking back. The December air hit my face like a slap, cold and clarifying. I'd parked my car down the street the night before, a habit born from years of needing quick escape routes from family gatherings that became unbearable. The engine turned over smoothly, and within minutes I was on the highway, leaving my mother's house and everything it represented in the rearview mirror. I did not cry. I had expected tears, had braced myself for the flood of emotion that always seemed to follow confrontations with my family. But my eyes remained dry, my hands steady on the steering wheel. What I felt instead was a profound sense of relief, like finally setting down a weight I had been carrying for so long that I had forgotten it was even there. The downtown hotel I had chosen was one of those boutique places that catered to business travelers and weekend getaway seekers. I had booked the suite on impulse 3 days earlier, when the first signs of Christmas disaster had begun to emerge during phone calls with my mother. Call it intuition, call it self-preservation, but some part of me had known that this year would be the breaking point. The lobby was quiet when I arrived, just a sleepy night clerk who processed my early check-in without comment or curiosity. The elevator carried me up to the 8th floor, and when I opened the door to my suite, I felt something shift inside my chest. This was mine. This space. This decision. This moment of choosing myself over a family that had never chosen me. The suite was beautiful. All clean lines and soft lighting, and a bed that looked like a cloud. A welcome bottle of champagne sat chilling in an ice bucket, and the bathroom featured a soaking tub deep enough to lose yourself in. I had paid for this myself, with money I had earned through years of hard work and sacrifice. No one could take it away from me, or diminish its value with backhanded comments about gratitude. I changed into the plush hotel robe, poured myself a glass of champagne, and settled into the comfortable armchair by the window. The city of Denver stretched out below me, its lights twinkling in the pre-dawn darkness. Somewhere out there, people were waking up in happy homes, surrounded by families who loved them equally and completely. I had spent my whole life believing that if I just tried harder, worked more, complained less, I could have that too. But some truths cannot be wished away. Some families are simply broken in ways that no amount of effort can fix. And at a certain point, the healthiest thing you can do is stop trying to repair what was never whole to begin with. I picked up my phone and opened the camera. The champagne glass caught the light beautifully, and the robe looked expensive and luxurious against the backdrop of the elegant suite. I snapped a photo, then another, finding the angle that best captured the city view behind me. On any other day, I would never post something so blatantly indulgent on social media. But today was not any other day, and I was not the same person I had been 12 hours ago. I uploaded the photo without a caption, just the image itself speaking volumes about where I was and how I was spending my Christmas. Let them interpret it however they wanted. Let them wonder why I was in a luxury hotel instead of sleeping in my mother's guest bedroom. I woke to the sound of my phone vibrating aggressively against the nightstand. Even with the ringer silenced, the device seemed to pulse with fury, lighting up every few seconds with a new notification. I squinted at the clock on the wall. 8:47 in the morning. I had slept for less than 4 hours, but I felt more rested than I had in months, maybe years. The hotel room looked even more beautiful in the daylight, winter sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows and illuminating the tasteful decor. I stretched luxuriously beneath the expensive sheets, taking my time before reaching for the phone. Whatever storm was brewing back at my mother's house, it could wait until I had properly enjoyed my morning. Room service arrived 30 minutes later, a lavish breakfast spread that included fresh fruit, flaky pastries, eggs prepared exactly how I liked them, crispy bacon, and a pitcher of freshly squeezed orange juice for mimosas. I tipped the server generously and settled into my meal with a sense of decadence that felt almost rebellious. The food was delicious, each bite a small rebellion against the years of settling for less than I deserved. Only after I had finished my breakfast, poured my second mimosa, and arranged myself comfortably in the armchair by the window, did I finally flip over my phone to survey the damage. 23 missed calls from my mother, 15 from my father, 8 from Vivian, and a flood of text messages that painted a vivid picture of exactly how my absence had been received at the family home. The first message from my mother, sent at 7:12 in the morning, was relatively restrained. "Ariel, where are you? Your car isn't outside and your bed hasn't been slept in." The second, sent 4 minutes later, escalated quickly. "Why is there a keychain in the middle of the living room floor? What is the meaning of this? Call me immediately." By the third message, all pretense of calm had completely evaporated. "Call me immediately. You have ruined Christmas for everyone. Your sister is in tears because you left without saying goodbye. How could you be so selfish?" I scrolled through the increasingly frantic messages, each one more desperate and accusatory than the last. My mother demanded explanations, threatened unspecified consequences, accused me of being selfish and dramatic, and ungrateful for everything she had done for me. My father's messages were more measured, but carried the same undertone of disappointment that I had heard in his voice my entire life. And Vivian's contributions were predictably self-centered, focused entirely on how my absence was affecting her special holiday. Not a single message acknowledged why I might have left. Not one person in my family seemed capable of connecting my departure to the grotesque display of favoritism they had subjected me to less than 12 hours earlier. In their minds, I was simply being difficult, acting out, seeking attention in inappropriate ways. I typed a response to my mother, choosing my words with surgical precision. I matched the value of the gift I received and removed myself from a celebration where I clearly wasn't wanted. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your holiday. The reply came almost instantly, as though my mother had been sitting with her phone in her hand, waiting for any sign of life from me. What is that supposed to mean? You are being absolutely ridiculous and dramatic. Get back here right now and apologize to your sister for ruining her Christmas. Apologize to my sister? For what, exactly? For not applauding enthusiastically enough when she received a luxury vehicle while I clutched a piece of junk that cost less than a fast food meal. For failing to properly worship at the altar of Vivian's specialness. The audacity was almost impressive in its complete lack of self-awareness. I set the phone down and took a long, satisfying sip of my mimosa. My mother's anger no longer had the power to destabilize me the way it once had. I had spent decades trying to earn her approval, twisting myself into knots to meet standards that seemed to shift every time I got close. But you cannot win a game where the rules are designed to ensure your failure. You can only decide when to stop playing. My phone rang again, my mother's name flashing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail without a moment's hesitation. Then I went to my settings and activated Do Not Disturb mode, allowing only calls from Josephine to come through. If my family wanted to reach me, they could leave messages that I would review at my leisure. I was no longer at their beck and call. The morning drifted by peacefully after that. I took a long bath in the gorgeous soaking tub, using all the expensive bath products the hotel provided. I ordered more coffee from room service and spent an hour reading a book I had been meaning to finish for months. I painted my nails a deep burgundy color and watched the clouds drift past my window, like I had nowhere else in the world to be. Around noon, Josephine called. I answered immediately, grateful for a friendly voice in the midst of the family chaos. "I saw your photo this morning," she said, laughter evident in her tone. "Luxury hotel suite, champagne, no caption whatsoever. That is an absolute power move and I am here for it. What happened?" I told her everything, from the cheap keychain to the Range Rover with its ridiculous silver bow, to my mother's declaration that fair was fair. Josephine listened without interruption, her occasional sharp intakes of breath the only indication of her reaction to the absurdity of it all. "A $3 keychain," she repeated when I finished. "While your sister got a car that costs more than most people make in 3 years, and your mother thinks you're the one being dramatic?" $2.99 to be exact. The price tag was still attached. "I cannot believe this woman." Josephine's voice was tight with anger on my behalf. "Actually, scratch that. I absolutely can believe it because I've watched this pattern for years, but the Range Rover really takes the favoritism to a whole new level. The worst part is that she genuinely doesn't seem to understand why I'm upset. In her mind, Vivian deserved that car, and I should be grateful for whatever I received." The afternoon brought a shift in my family's tactics. When fury and demands failed to produce the desired result of my immediate return, they pivoted to manipulation. My father's message arrived around 2 o'clock, carefully crafted to appeal to my sense of guilt and family obligation. "Your mother is very upset, sweetheart. I know things got tense last night, but can't we talk about this like adults? Family is important, and we should be together during the holidays. Family is important." The phrase had been weaponized against me so many times over the years that it had lost all meaning. Family was important when it meant I should attend every holiday gathering and smile through whatever indignities were heaped upon me. Family was considerably less important when it came to treating me with basic respect or acknowledging my accomplishments or giving me gifts that showed any thought whatsoever. I did not respond to my father's message. Instead, I opened my laptop and booked another night at the hotel. The second wave of manipulation came from an unexpected source. My Aunt Louise, my mother's younger sister. She called 3 times before leaving a voicemail that I listened to with growing incredulity. "Ariel, honey, it's Aunt Louise. I just got off the phone with your mother, and she is absolutely devastated by what's happened. She doesn't understand why you left, or what she did wrong. I know your mom can be difficult sometimes, but she loves you so much and only wants what's best for both her daughters. Won't you please call her and work this out? Christmas is supposed to be about family and forgiveness, not grudges and hotel rooms." What she did wrong, as if the answer were not blindingly obvious to anyone with functioning eyes and a basic sense of fairness. My mother had spent decades perfecting the art of playing innocent, of reframing every conflict so that she emerged as the wounded party deserving of sympathy and support. It was gaslighting dressed up as maternal concern, and I was absolutely done falling for it. I texted Aunt Louise a brief reply. "I appreciate your concern, but this is a matter between me and my parents. I won't be discussing it further with extended family members." Then I blocked her number, at least temporarily. The flying monkeys had been dispatched to bring me back into line, and I had no interest in explaining or defending myself to people who had already chosen sides without knowing the full story. By evening, the messages from my immediate family had taken on a desperate, almost pleading edge. My mother was no longer demanding that I return. She was begging in a way that might have moved me if I did not know her so well. "Ariel, please. I don't understand what's happening or why you're doing this to us. Whatever I did, I'm sorry. Just come home and we can talk about it like a family. Your father and I are worried sick about you." The apology was notable for its complete lack of specificity. She was sorry for whatever she had done, which meant she either genuinely did not understand the problem or was pretending not to, in hopes that I would fill in the blanks and somehow absolve her in the process. Either way, it was not the acknowledgement I needed, and I was done accepting crumbs when I deserved the whole meal. I considered responding, considered laying out in plain language exactly what had happened and why it was unacceptable. But I had tried that approach before, countless times over the years. My mother had an inexhaustible supply of excuses and deflections for every accusation. Vivian needed more support because she was younger, more sensitive, going through a difficult time. The gifts were different because Vivian had different needs and responded to different kinds of encouragement. The financial disparities were acceptable because Vivian would pay them back someday, in some undefined way that never seemed to materialize. Nothing I said would ever break through those defenses. My mother's entire worldview was built on the foundation of Vivian's specialness, and admitting that she had treated me unfairly would require dismantling everything she believed about herself as a parent. That was work she would have to do herself, if she ever chose to do it at all. So I said nothing. I let my silence speak for itself. That night, I went down to the hotel restaurant and ordered a proper celebratory meal, treating myself to a perfectly cooked steak dinner and a glass of excellent wine. The restaurant was half empty, most guests having traveled elsewhere for the holiday weekend, and I enjoyed the peaceful ambiance and attentive service. The server, a kind woman named Margaret, asked if I was celebrating anything special. "Independence," I told her with a smile. "I'm celebrating my independence." She smiled back like she understood perfectly what I meant and brought me a complimentary dessert at the end of the meal, a decadent chocolate cake that I savored slowly. Back in my suite, I pulled up social media and posted another photo. This one of the beautiful dinner spread with the city lights twinkling through the window behind me. Again, no caption. Let them wonder about my whereabouts. Let them imagine me living my best life while they sat at my mother's house, stewing in their own dysfunction and wondering where everything went wrong. Vivian had been posting too, I noticed. A series of photos with her Range Rover from various angles, each one hashtagged within an inch of its life. Blessed, grateful, best Christmas ever, living my best life. The comments were full of congratulations and envy, her followers completely unaware of the cost of that blessing, or the sister who had been cast aside so Vivian could shine. I closed the app and put my phone away. Comparison was the thief of joy, as the saying went, and I had no interest in letting Vivian's manufactured happiness diminish my own hard-won peace. She could have her car and her hashtags. I had something more valuable, my self-respect. The knock on my hotel room door came at exactly 11 o'clock in the morning on the second day. I had just finished getting dressed, planning to explore downtown Denver, and perhaps do some post-Christmas shopping with the money I had saved by not buying extravagant gifts for people who did not appreciate anything I did. I opened the door, expecting housekeeping, perhaps, or a delivery of some kind. Instead, I found my mother standing in the hallway, her face a mask of righteous indignation and wounded maternal pride. "How did you find me?" The words came out flat, devoid of the surprise I probably should have felt. "Your social media posts," she said, pushing past me into the suite without waiting for an invitation. "The hotel lobby was visible in the background of one of your photos. It wasn't hard to figure out which property it was." Of course, I had been too careless, too focused on making a statement to consider that my mother might take my posts as a challenge, rather than a boundary. She surveyed the room with barely concealed disdain, taking in the rumpled sheets from my peaceful night's sleep, the empty champagne bottle, the room service cart still waiting to be collected. "So this is where you've been hiding? Spending money on luxury hotels while your family worried themselves sick about you?" "I'm not the one who spent $130,000 on a car for one daughter while giving the other a gas station trinket," I replied evenly, refusing to let her set the tone of this conversation. "My little getaway is a drop in the bucket compared to what Vivian received yesterday." My mother's face flushed with anger. "That car was a special gift for a special occasion. Your sister has been through so much this year, and your father and I wanted to do something meaningful to lift her spirits. Is that really so hard for you to understand? Why must you always make everything about yourself? And my keychain? Was that also a special gift? Was there thoughtful reasoning behind giving me something that cost less than a cup of coffee while my sister got a luxury vehicle?" She waved her hand dismissively, a gesture I had seen 1,000 times when she wanted to brush aside my concerns. "You're always so focused on material things, Ariel. It's unbecoming. Christmas isn't about what you receive. It's about family, being together, showing love and appreciation for each other." "Really?" I felt my voice rising and forced myself to stay calm, to not give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. "Because it seems to me that Christmas is very much about material things when it comes to Vivian. Designer bags, expensive jewelry, a $130,000 car. But when it comes to me, suddenly Christmas is about the spirit of the holiday and being grateful for whatever scraps I receive." "You're twisting my words. That's not what I meant at all, and you know it." "Then what did you mean, Mother? Please, explain it to me in terms I can understand. Explain how it's fair that Vivian has received hundreds of thousands of dollars in gifts over the years while I get dollar store items and lectures about humility and gratitude. I really, genuinely want to understand your logic." My mother opened her mouth, closed it, then opened it again. For once in her life, she seemed genuinely at a loss for words. The silence stretched between us, heavy with decades of unspoken resentments and avoided conversations. "Your sister needs more support," she finally said, falling back on the familiar excuse like a security blanket. "She's sensitive and she struggles with things that come easily to you. You've always been so strong and capable, Ariel. You don't need the same things she needs. What I need is to be treated like I matter. What I need is for my own mother to see me, really see me, instead of treating me like an afterthought in my own family. What I need is to not feel invisible every single time I walk through your front door." Tears welled in my mother's eyes, but I had seen this performance too many times over the years to be moved by it. The crying was a manipulation tactic, a way to shift the focus from her behavior to my reaction to her behavior. If I pushed any harder, she would claim that I was being cruel, that I was attacking her unfairly, that she was the true victim in this scenario. "I came here to bring you home," she said, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "Your father and I miss you. Vivian is still upset that you left without saying goodbye. Can't we just put this unpleasantness behind us and enjoy the rest of the holiday together as a family? Put it behind us, as if the underlying issues would simply disappear if we stopped talking about them. As if a lifetime of favoritism could be erased by my agreement to pretend it had never happened." "No," I said quietly but firmly. "I don't think I can do that anymore, Mother." "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done. I'm done coming to holidays where I'm treated like a second-class citizen in my own family. I'm done watching Vivian get everything she wants while I'm told to be humble and grateful for table scraps. I'm done making myself small to fit into a family that has never made room for me." My mother stared at me like I had grown a second head. In her worldview, this moment was incomprehensible. Children did not reject their parents, did not draw boundaries, did not refuse to participate in family traditions no matter how dysfunctional those traditions might be. "You don't mean that," she said, but there was uncertainty in her voice now. "You're upset, and you're being dramatic. Once you calm down, you'll see that this whole thing has been blown completely out of proportion." "I've never been calmer in my entire life," I told her honestly. "And I've never been more certain of anything. I think you should leave now." She did not move immediately. She stood in the middle of my hotel suite, looking around as if seeing everything for the first time, perhaps finally realizing that I had built a life for myself that did not depend on her approval, or her gifts, or her acknowledgement of my existence. "If you walk away from this family," she said slowly, "don't expect us to welcome you back with open arms when you come to your senses. I stopped expecting anything from this family a long time ago, Mother. That's the whole point." My mother left without another word, her silence more telling than any parting shot could have been. I closed the door behind her and leaned against it, my heart pounding but my resolve completely unshaken. The confrontation I had been avoiding for years had finally happened, and now that it was over, I felt lighter than I had in decades. The week between Christmas and New Year's Eve became a period of profound transformation. I extended my hotel stay twice more, using the time and space to think clearly about what I wanted my life to look like, without the constant weight of my family's expectations pressing down on me. Josephine came to visit on the third day, bringing wine and take-out Thai food, and the kind of uncomplicated friendship I had always craved from my blood relatives. We sat on the hotel bed eating pad thai and talking for hours, the conversation ranging from my immediate family situation to our broader hopes and dreams for the future. "You know what I realized?" I told her, twirling noodles around my fork. "I've spent so much energy over the years trying to earn love from people who decided a long time ago not to give it to me. Imagine what I could accomplish if I redirected all that effort toward people and things that actually matter." Josephine nodded thoughtfully. "You've been pouring water into a bucket with no bottom for your entire life. Of course you're exhausted. Of course nothing ever feels like enough for them." It was such an apt metaphor that I wrote it down in my phone, wanting to remember it in moments of weakness, when the old patterns threatened to resurface. My family's attempts to contact me had dwindled to a trickle by then. My mother sent one final message on the 28th of December, informing me that she was deeply hurt by my behavior and hoped I would come to my senses before irreparable damage was done to our relationship. The lack of any acknowledgement of her own role in the conflict was notable, but not surprising. I did not respond. What surprised me was the message I received from my father on New Year's Eve. Unlike my mother's communications, which were always heavy with accusation and manipulation, his was simple and almost tentative. I know things have been difficult between you and your mother. I probably haven't handled them as well as I should have over the years. If you ever want to talk, just the two of us, I'd like that. I read the message several times, trying to parse its meaning. My father had always been a passive presence in my childhood, allowing my mother to dictate the family dynamics while he retreated into his own world of work and hobbies. He had never actively mistreated me, but he had also never protected me from my mother's obvious favoritism. His sin was one of omission rather than commission, but it was still a betrayal. I decided to wait before responding. If he truly wanted to understand what had happened and why, he would need to demonstrate that commitment through actions rather than words. A single conciliatory text message was not enough to undo decades of standing by while I was treated like less than my sister. New Year's Eve itself was a revelation. Josephine had invited me to a party at her boyfriend's apartment, a gathering of interesting people who knew nothing about my family drama and had no expectations of me beyond basic social courtesy. I wore a dress I had bought for myself, drank champagne I had paid for myself, and rang in the new year surrounded by people who were genuinely happy to have me there. At midnight, as fireworks exploded over the Denver skyline and everyone around me cheered and embraced, I felt something shift permanently into place inside my chest. This was what belonging felt like. This was what it meant to be valued not for what you could provide or how small you could make yourself, but simply for who you were. My phone buzzed with a text from Vivian, the first direct message she had sent since Christmas morning. Happy New Year. Mom says you're not coming to the family dinner tomorrow. Are you really going to miss it? I typed back a single word without hesitation. Yes. Then I turned off my phone and returned to the party, to the friends who had chosen me, to the life I was finally allowing myself to build on my own terms. The consequences of my absence rippled through my extended family in ways I had not anticipated. In the weeks that followed, I received messages from cousins, aunts, and uncles, all wanting to know what had happened, all offering their own interpretations of the situation based on whatever my mother had told them. What emerged was a picture of a family in complete disarray. Without me there to serve as the designated scapegoat, the dysfunction that had always existed beneath the surface began to show itself more clearly to everyone who had previously been blind to it. My mother, who had always presented a picture-perfect image to the outside world, was struggling to explain why her oldest daughter had suddenly cut off all contact. "She's been telling everyone you had some kind of mental breakdown," my cousin Tyler reported during a phone call in mid-January. "Said you've been acting erratically, and she's very concerned about your mental health and well-being." I laughed out loud at that absurd characterization. A mental breakdown? Because I left a gathering where I was being publicly humiliated. I know, it's absolutely ridiculous, but some people in the family are buying her version of events. Others not so much. Even Aunt Louise mentioned that she thought the whole Range Rover situation was pretty over the top and obviously unfair. The fact that even Louise, my mother's sister, and usually her staunchest defender, had noticed the disparity was significant. My mother's carefully constructed narrative was beginning to crack, and the light was seeping through in uncomfortable ways for her. But the real vindication came from an unexpected source about 3 weeks after Christmas. Vivian herself. I received a message from her that was markedly different from her usual tone. Gone was the self-centered whining about how my absence was affecting her holiday and her relationship with our parents. In its place was something that almost resembled genuine reflection and self-awareness. "I've been thinking a lot since Christmas," she wrote. "I didn't fully realize how different our experiences have been until you left. I mean, I knew our gifts were always different, but I never really stopped to consider how that must have felt for you year after year. Mom always told me you didn't care about material things, that you preferred practical gifts because you were so independent and capable." I believed her without questioning it. "I'm sorry." I stared at the message for a long time, trying to decide how to respond. Vivian was not entirely blameless in this situation. She had accepted every lavish gift and every favorable treatment, without ever questioning whether it might be hurting her sister. But she was also, in some ways, as much a victim of my mother's distorted worldview as I was. She had been trained since birth to believe she deserved more, that her needs were more pressing, that she was simply worth more than me. "I appreciate you saying that," I finally replied. "But I need some time before I can have a real conversation with you about any of this." Her response was gracious, more gracious than I had expected given her history of self-absorption. "I understand completely. I'm here whenever you're ready." It was not reconciliation, not yet, but it was a crack in the wall between us, a possibility that some relationships within my family might be salvageable, even if others were permanently damaged. My mother, meanwhile, continued her campaign to paint me as the villain in this family drama. Through various channels, I heard about the stories she was telling anyone who would listen. According to her, I had always been ungrateful and difficult. I had always been jealous of Vivian. I had always been demanding and impossible to please no matter how much she tried to make me happy. The irony would have been funny if it were not so deeply painful. I, who had spent my entire life asking for nothing more than basic fairness and acknowledgement, was being cast as the demanding one. I, who had accepted every indignity with a smile for nearly 3 decades, was being called ungrateful. But the beautiful thing about truth is that it tends to surface eventually, no matter how hard someone tries to bury it. The people who knew me well understood immediately that my mother's version of events did not match reality. And the people who did not know me well enough to question her narrative were not people whose opinions I needed to care about. Spring arrived with its promise of renewal, and I found myself in a completely different place, both literally and figuratively. I had left my mother's orbit entirely, declining every invitation, ignoring every attempt at guilt-tripping, and focusing instead on building the life I had always deserved but never allowed myself to pursue. My career flourished in ways it never had when I was constantly distracted by family drama and the emotional labor of managing my mother's expectations. I received a promotion at work in March, earned a significant raise, and started exploring opportunities for leadership positions that I had previously thought were beyond my reach. Without the emotional weight of trying to earn my mother's approval, I had energy and creativity to spare. I also started therapy, something I should have done years earlier. My therapist helped me understand the patterns of my childhood, the way I had been conditioned to accept less than I deserved, to make myself smaller, to believe that my worth was determined by how useful I could be to others. Unpacking those beliefs was painful but necessary, like cleaning out an infected wound so it could finally begin to heal. As for my family, the consequences of their behavior continued to unfold throughout the spring. My father reached out again in April, this time with more substance to offer. We met for coffee at a neutral location, just the two of us, and he surprised me by actually acknowledging what he had failed to see for so long. "I let your mother run the show our entire marriage," he admitted, staring into his cup like it held the answers to questions he had never thought to ask. I told myself it was easier that way, that keeping the peace was more important than making sure things were actually fair. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. It was not a complete apology, and it did not erase decades of passive neglect, but it was a start. We agreed to continue talking, to see if some version of a father-daughter relationship could be rebuilt on more honest foundations. My mother, I heard through the family grapevine, was not faring nearly as well. Without me to serve as the responsible older daughter, the one who could be counted on to handle crises and smooth over conflicts, she had been forced to see Vivian more clearly. And Vivian, it turned out, was not the perfect golden child my mother had always believed her to be. There were problems with money because Vivian had never learned to budget, problems with relationships because Vivian had never been required to compromise, problems with basic life skills that no one had ever bothered to teach her. The Range Rover sat in her apartment complex parking lot, mostly unused because Vivian could not afford the insurance payments without additional help from our parents. Patricia found herself facing the inevitable consequences of a lifetime of unequal treatment. The daughter she had invested everything in was incapable of functioning independently, while the daughter she had neglected had built a successful and fulfilling life without her. The irony was not lost on anyone in our extended family, least of all my mother herself. She grew increasingly bitter and isolated as the months passed, her complaints about my abandonment growing shriller and more desperate as people stopped wanting to listen. Friends grew tired of her constant victimhood and her refusal to acknowledge any fault in the situation. Extended family members who had initially taken her side began to question her version of events. Slowly but surely, she found herself more alone than she had ever been, her perfect family image shattered beyond any hope of repair. Vivian and I did eventually have that real conversation, a long and difficult discussion that laid bare years of resentment and misunderstanding on both sides. She apologized more genuinely than I had thought she was capable of, and I accepted her apology, though our relationship would never be what it could have been if we had been treated equally from the start. We were building something new between us, something smaller and more cautious than sisterhood should be, but something real, nonetheless. As for me, I spent the first anniversary of my Christmas departure in a way that felt perfectly right. I bought myself a beautiful piece of jewelry, something I had admired in a shop window for years, but had always felt too guilty to purchase. I wore it to dinner with Josephine and her boyfriend, celebrating not just the holiday, but the life I had built since walking away from my mother's house with nothing but a $3 keychain and a heart full of quiet resolve. Looking back on that journey from humiliation to freedom, I felt nothing but gratitude for the moment I had finally chosen myself. The pain had been real, and the losses significant, but the freedom I had gained was worth every difficult step along the way. I had learned that you cannot pour from an empty cup, that you cannot save relationships with people who refuse to see your value, that sometimes the bravest and most loving thing you can do is walk away. And as I raised my glass to the new year stretching out before me, surrounded by people who loved me exactly as I was, I knew with absolute certainty that the best revenge was not anger or bitterness or dramatic confrontation. The best revenge was simply this: living well, loving fully, and never again accepting less than I deserved.